Up in Brooklyn, was it the Dodgers or the Yankees?
I was a Yankee fan, and I used to get in fights every week.
I'm just going to say, how could you possibly do that?
Because I love Mickey Mantle.
So,
And when I was younger, I actually knew Sandy Koufax when I was a kid. I mean, he was older, but I saw him in the park, you know, when he was playing when he was young. No, I was always a Yankee fan. I don't know. My mother was a Yankee fan, you know, and she loved Mickey Mantle, and my mother was a big influence on me. And I just loved the Yankees. The Dodgers were. I was the only person, I think, in all of Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, that was a Yankee fan.
I was just going to say, that puts you in such a distinct category.
Oh, yeah, and in danger. And in danger for my life when I went to the park. But I didn't worry about it too much, no.
Do you guys, was there television at the time when you were following it, or was it principally radio?
No, the first TV, I remember, when my dad came back from the Pacific, and I was about, he was injured, and he came back in 45, and I was 3 years old. And I remember vividly that he went back to being a cop. It was very weird because he got drafted and he was a cop, and they weren't supposed to draft cops. But he taught at the police academy, he taught judo, and he was a very famous athlete. He was an Olympic swimmer. And what was the question?
No, I
thought about my dad, and I was thinking about it.
Yeah, well, his dad, and ultimately, you know, baseball and radio and television and.
Well, I don't know. Baseball is just, you know, when you're a kid in the city, you play stickball, you play stoop ball, you play box ball. There's no grass to run around on and throw footballs.
Yeah.
You know, we played stickball in the street or into a box, and when it was into a box, I would always win because I really could throw fast.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like I wanted to be a baseball player, but I always loved music, and my mother always had like Benny Goodman or the Lombardos, or you know, not Guy Lombardo, but the two brothers. I forget the name. They both had bands.
Yeah.
What are the two guys that had the big bands? Anyway, she listened to big band music, and my uncle loved jazz, you know, and he was always listening to jazz. So that was the influences I had.
Then, was your mother a pianist? Was she a performer? Or
No, my mother founded the Freedom Rides and became a very famous. She's a founder of the Freedom Rides. When you read, if you get my book, you'll see the letter from the Congress of Racial Equality that'll blow your mind about Artie Kornfeld. She's a star in my family, not me.
Well, today you are the star.
Well, I'm just a representative of a hope, of a dream.
Capitol Records was kind of a new concept at the time, and you took a pretty commanding position there. How did that connect?
Well, actually, my good friend Charles Koppelman, who just sold his stock in Martha Stewart and was chairman of the board of EMI Records for 15 years, we met. If you read my book, you'll see this. So we met by accident in a snack bar at Queens College Night School. And he had just taken over the job working for Donnie Kirshner and Al Nevins for Nevins Kirshner Music. And if you were a writer, I had already had a record out when I was 16. You know, I was signed when I was 16, so I had a record out, and then it died, and nothing else happened. And I ran into Charles, and you read the book, you'll crack up the story. It's hysterical how that all happened. So we met. Next day, I go in with a demo I made, and I play for Donnie Kirshner, and they signed me here I am now, signed to Alden Music, Goffin King, Man and Weil, Sedaka, I mean, Brian Wilson, Jan Berry, I mean, great writers all around. And there I was, the Screen Gems, we were just selling to Screen Gems at the time. And there I was, you know, it was so simple. You wrote a song and you played it for Donnie Kirshner, because he was the boss, and if Kirshner liked it, you got a budget to go in into Bell Sound, or, well, not Bell, in those days we went to the smaller studios. You know, I'm trying to remember the names, I don't even remember. But we'd go into Dick Charles, right? Dick Charles was a big place to go to make demos. And you get your 3 hours, and you do 3 songs in 3 hours.
Right.
That included the vocals, everything. So we really learned, and we were cutting, I don't even know if it was 2-track at that point, but I think it was 2-track, and we were cutting 2-track. And what happened is, Jerry and Carol put out Locomotion, which was a 2-track demo, and then they put out Hey Girl. Little Eva was the housekeeper. you know, so they had Little Eva sing, you know, and Freddie Scott was a handyman, and he sang Hey Girl, you know, and then I did it with the Shirelles thing on a song called Tonight You're Gonna Fall in Love With Me, where they just overdubbed Shirley over my demo. We got so good at making demos that a lot of us went into producing records, you know.
It's up, then you kind of, after you left Capitol and...
Oh, you asked about Capitol. I got to, before Capitol, I had already run Mercury and I had already run Roulette. So Capitol was the third label. It was my biggest, because I was the first, I was the first vice president of rock in the music business history. Because that's the way the PR went out, vice president of rock. And then rock was just coming in. And it was about 1965 or 6. It was just going out of pop and into rock. It's when I was hanging out with like the Moby Grape and I signed Quicksilver, stuff like that. And that was like the start of rock, right?
You can ask, go ahead.
I'm talking to you later about Moby Grape.
Yeah. The manager, Matthew Cates, is a total lunatic. He used to drink his own urine. He did. And he had his daughter do it too, and he believed that was the key to longer life. Anyway, that's a private story. Sorry, Matt. So he lived near me in Malibu, so that's how I know. He tried.
I was going to ask you, what was that sort of tipping point that sort of said, gee, I'm going to create this company called the Woodstock Music and Arts Festival?
No, I was running Capitol. I was very successful. I ran the East Coast. I had no budgets. I mean, the president, chairman of the board loved me. I probably signed the first deal where I had no limits. Nobody could say no to what I wanted to do. I was in the studio with Debbie Harry at the time. I had Axelrod who was producing Lou Rawls. Nick Venet was doing Linda Ronstadt. Things were happening in the company, you know. And then, you know, just one day, and I was known for having an open door for everybody. And my secretary said that there's a kid out here with long hair, which had never seen, except I did have Bert Summer, who I produced 3 albums with, who was in hair. And I knew the guys who wrote hair, Ragney and Rado. And she said his name is Michael Lang. I said, does he have an appointment? She said, no. I said, well, ask him if he can come back tomorrow. And then she got back on the phone. He said, tell you that he's from Bensonhurst, so he's from the neighborhood now. So I brought him in. Now, his story is I was sitting on my desk smoking hash. And that is so bizarre because I hadn't even gotten high yet. He's the one who got me into grass. John Sebastian, when I had the spoonful, John Sebastian gave me a joint one time. That was the extent of my drug experimentation. You know, and Lang had lost his head shop. The police closed him down in Florida. You know, so I wound up living with me because I was already living in the tallest building in Manhattan, in the penthouse apartment, you know, and you know, just still in my jeans and still with my wife, and I had a new baby, and life was wonderful, you know, and Capitol paid for everything, so it was really even more wonderful, you know, and so this guy Michael Lang came in, and we just became friends instantly like that, you know, and then he didn't have money, so I sort of supported him for like a year and a half, and then one night we were shooting pool, and we were playing bumper pool, and I was on the 40th floor. And I looked out over that was the highest residential building at that time, and you could look out over the whole city. And Michael said, Artie, you know, you're tainted. You don't go to concerts anymore. I said, Michael, I've been doing this since 1956, you know, and I've seen so many contracts. I played in so many clubs. I've seen so many concerts. You know, I'm in the studio all the time, and I write, and you don't do that stuff. Your way of getting connected to music is to go see it. Mine is to make it. And then I said, what if we took a Broadway theater and had and just made it free until we use my money because you don't have any, and when we run out of money, we'll just close it down. But we'll try to get the biggest acts we can, and we'll make it free. And then he said, well, I started to work on a thing in Miami called Miami Pop, but what happened is it rained and it folded, you know, and it was called a festival. So that stuck in my mind, festival. And then Linda, my late wife, may her soul rest in peace, said, well, gee, what if you guys took it outside? And then the bell went off, you know, and then I actually saw the field. And then I said, yeah, I said, well, if we took it outside, Michael, suppose we had Hendrix and Joplin and all these people. how many think would come? Michael said, oh, about 50,000. And I said, no, there'd have to be 100,000. My wife said, there'll be more than 300,000. Just like that. And I swear to God, I looked off that terrace, and I actually saw that field. That's why when I'm interviewed in the movie, everybody says, oh, well, you spaced out. Of course I was spaced out. I was looking at a dream that came true. And I had seen it before. I had seen it a year before. Because we talked about it for 4 or 5 months, and then we met John and Joel, and they wrote in the book. Michael didn't say a word. Artie did all the talking. And I talked him into the 250 grand. And that was the start, you know.
Location, location, location.
We were always going to call it Woodstock, even though there was no land in Woodstock big enough to have it in, only because our friends lived there. I had the band at Capitol, they lived there. Albert Grossman was one of my best friends. You know, Richie was living up there. Everybody was living up in Woodstock or in Coconut Grove, Florida, you know, or in Sausalito, you know, in California. And that was just the way it was, you know. Location, Michael did a real stupid thing. He went out and built a site in Walk Hill with no permit from the town. So that wiped out the whole budget, and so I ran the ad that brought in $1.5 million, you know, with tickets that I didn't even think was going to sell tickets. I was shocked, you know. And we still went, when it was all over, we were $1.4 million in debt. It cost $2.4 million. The original budget was $250,000. Michael went 600% over budget. I went 60% over budget. Mm-hmm. But I had 2 million people on the road still. You know, I promoted it, and I didn't promote it very heavy. I mean, I planned it out. I knew how to promote records. I've been writing songs for these people for so many years, and they were buying my songs. I knew the audience. I knew them, and I knew the program directors. And I got time buys that people couldn't get, yeah. And I got disc jockeys talking about it, you know. So it was like Bruce Mosher, who lives here, who has Could Be Wild Promotions. He said Woodstock was not your greatest promotion. Tracy Chapman was, and he's right. Woodstock was easy for me to promote. I just knew exactly what to do, and it wasn't me. I was a messenger. I was not the creator. I just knew from whatever power I could zap in on, I just knew exactly what to do.
Well, how did you end up with Max Yasgur's farm?
The real story is I'm sitting in my apartment, and my cousin Lenore lived on 57th Street, and she had a neighbor who was a gay interior designer. His uncle was Max Yasgur. The whole Elliot Tiber thing is all lies, all lies, totally. I get a phone call from this guy. He says, Mr. Kornfeld, I live next door to your cousin Lenore, and my uncle Max Yasgur has a cattle farm up in Bethel, New York, and he's going to lose it. He needs $60,000 desperately. So I said, well, let me have his number, and I called Michael. I said, Michael, there's a guy named Max Yasgur. And this is the true story, not Michael's story. This is the honest truth, because there's witnesses to this story, and it's even in my book. People that heard the conversation, you know. And Michael went and met with Max and made the deal for the farm.
How much was the rent? Would you remember?
It was $60,000 originally. And then when I got up there, I couldn't believe it. I just got through closing the movie deal, and we left right from Warner Brothers to get up there. And Michael says to me, Artie, take the motorcycle. We're all over these farmers' lands. There's 12 farms here, and we got 40,000 people on the land. And I said, well, why didn't you get releases? He says, well, you have to do that. I said, Michael, first of all, I don't even ride motorcycles. Second of all, you should have taken care of this. That's your part of the trip. Yeah. You know, I'm on the other side of the fence. I'm in New York getting people there. So I went from door to door. I drove the motorcycle, and I went with a pad, and I had the right to sign for Woodstock Ventures. Sure. And if you were Vito Galanzo from Italy, and you had your whole life invested in this farm, and all of a sudden everything was getting trampled, if you said, I want $60,000, I wrote down, Woodstock Ventures owes Vito Galans $60,000 to be paid within 120 days. And I did that to about 16 farmers. I went to every farm and cooled them all out. And some were very nice. I wound up having coffee and a piece of pie, and some were ready to came to the door with shotguns.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my greeting to Woodstock. After I got totally wasted with Jerry Hart and Mickey Garcia.
Axe-wise, I noticed that one of the things you were able to get the axe is you paid him $12,000. That's referenced. Is that?
That's not, I know that's all bullshit.
Yeah.
That's not true at all. No, there was no set price on anybody. The first act to sign was Sly Stone, and really David Kaperlik, his manager, was a friend of mine. So people could say how Sly got in and this and that, but I knew Dave Kaperlik for 10, 15 years before Woodstock. He was in the music business, and so was I. No, there was no set price on anybody. That's, I don't know, that's a fable.
Did you have your selected, just the mere bands that were selected there, did you have your A list and B list?
No. What happened, what was really good is that Michael got in touch with Bill Graham, which was smart, and Bill Graham brought his whole crowd, the whole San Francisco group. Mm-hmm. In reality, only, well, actually Sweetwater and Nancy Nevins, the singer, they were the first band to ever get a deal out of San Francisco, a major deal. They never really happened. So that brought in Santana, that brought in The Dead, that brought in Sweetwater, that brought in, who am I forgetting, the Starship, or the Airplane at the time. And so that was that group, you know, and then I was talking to different managers that I knew and different producers, you know. So I knew Felix Papalardi and Bud Prager, so Mountain was in there, and I put in Bert Summer because I produced him, and Melanie was a friend of mine. I got her a record deal, and I put her into Woodstock. And Michael, we both had a friend named Hector Morales. When I was a singer and I had the Pied Piper out, Hector Morales was an agent for William Morris, and he was never mentioned by Michael or anybody, and he got most of the acts because he was a William Morris agent. He was living in Puerto Rico, and I don't know what he was doing for a living, but whatever it was, he was in Puerto Rico, but he had a lot to do. And I mentioned him in my book, and no one ever mentioned him. Also, no one ever mentioned Steve Cohn, who was really the stage manager of Woodstock. Steve Cohn is never mentioned. He's mentioned in my book. The pressure on him was so intense that he flipped out, and I had to sit with him for 4 hours and talk him down. He lost it. The pressure got to him. He couldn't take it, because when the rain hit, Michael's stage wouldn't turn anymore. So to change the acts, because if you took too much time with that many people, big chance for a riot. Right. You couldn't have people sitting there for 45 minutes in between acts. So when I watched this crew work, I was mesmerized, and I wanted to kiss every single one of these guys working. You know, I even started to lift amps and stuff myself, because I saw what they were going through, because without the turntable, and they were doing changes in 20 minutes, I mean, for big name acts. And that was amazing. I mean, that was really amazing. You know, it's not true that Jimi Hendrix wanted to close the show because he was the headliner. Because if you go into the archives of the Artie Kornfeld show at Artists First, you'll hear my interview with Jerry, the percussionist in the band The Gypsies, and he'll tell you the whole story of Jimi Hendrix. Jimmy said to me when he came up to stage, I said, "Jimmy, what'd you think?" Because Jimmy and Buddy Miles were friends of mine years before Woodstock. And Jimmy said, "Artie, if I could have played at 9 o'clock when I was supposed to 500,000 people," he said, "I was so tired and worn out, I did the best I can. It was only average." And it was, because I had heard Jimmy play before, and it was only average. And that's what Jimmy felt, and that's what I felt.
Were there bands that you just couldn't entice? I mean,
No.
Yeah.
I don't know what Michael was doing. I was really busy, you know, doing the word of mouth. I was meeting with the Black Panthers. I was meeting with the Weathermen. I was meeting with SDS. I was traveling the country, hitting every group that could cause trouble and making deals with them. The only deals I made was, we'll give you medical assistance, we'll give you legal assistance if you're busted, and we'll give you food if you don't have any.
Those are the deals you made with those groups?
With all those groups, yeah, and they accepted it. So when they showed up, no problem.
Was that obviously it was a fear factor, but you don't read that much about the fact that all those groups were going to possibly take advantage of that situation.
Well, you don't read about it because I didn't have a PR person. I didn't push that out there, but it's in my book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, it's just such a fascinating concept of it all.
Well, I knew what I had to do.
Yeah.
Like Michael said to me on the phone last week. I said, Michael, you went 600% over. He said, Artie, you know I never did one. I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, there is no trans. I mean, think about that concert. There was no real opportunity for a lot of sound checks. Normal.
No,
concert
but
stuff.
to tell you the truth, when the rain hit, and Michael's crew came through. I mean, Michael did pull his weight. I mean, it took the two of us and my wife to come up with the idea, and it did take Michael's staff, because he went and he bought the best he could get. So, Chip Monk was doing lights, he was the best in the world. Hanley was doing sound, he was the best in the world. Steve Cohn was an incredible stage manager. John Morris was a pro. Everybody was top drawer. So he was, he covered himself. And I was proud that it held. When the rain hit, it was so terrible. It was such a threat to everybody. And that's when the miracle happened.
Yeah.
When the rain hit, the miracle happened. Because we had the threat of being in jail for the rest of our life, of committing manslaughter if someone died. And everybody on the field just was so up about it. And then when my friend Barry the Fish, who's really a lawyer, he's a lawyer,
Yes, I didn't know that.
He's a very, he never lost a case, and he was a public defender in Yolo County while he was in Country Joe and the Fish. Barry Melton's a very great lawyer. So Barry the Fish started chanting, "No more rain, no more rain," and the rain did stop. And I even did the mudslide. Because I wanted
Did you do that?
Yeah, I did. I wanted to see what they were doing, so I wanted to enjoy it. I walked up on the field. I didn't go to the very top. I walked to the shops, because the one that said smoke shop, that was one of my best friends from college I played basketball with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The movie, which of course is iconic. You were instrumental in making that happen.
Well, according to the president of Warner Brothers, I was the only reason it happened.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's true. And I'm not being egotistical, it's just a fact. If I didn't produce, what happened was when I was at Mercury, Freddie Weintraub, on the bitter end, where Dylan first played, came to me with an act named Leon Bibb from Canada, and I spent 80 grand and I produced his act. When I was getting ready to go up to Woodstock, 3 or 4 days before, I read in Variety, Freddie Weintraub leaves bitter end and becomes vice president of films for Warner Brothers. So I called Freddie and he says, "Artie, I picked up, you're not going to talk to me about that crazy thing you're doing upstate." I said, "Yes, I am, Freddie, and you owe it to me." And that's why I went over, and we sat for 35 hours. And he even wrote about it in his book. His book is out, Freddie Weintraub's book. As a matter of fact, in my book, there's a letter from Freddie Weintraub stating how the Woodstock movie happened. It was a handwritten, after 35 hours, it was over. Ted Ashley came in. Fortunately, Ted Ashley was my agent when I had the Cowsills, when I was producing and writing the Cowsills. So I had Ted and Freddie, and they both owed me. And after 35 hours, they said, let's forget it. Movies are not, we're almost bankrupt at Warner Brothers. Movies are not doing anything, and documentaries are doing nothing. And then I said, out of nowhere, after 30 hours, I said, what if it's a disaster and 100,000 kids die? This thing will be the biggest movie in history. And they started laughing like crazy, and then Freddie just turned to me and said, "Okay, Ted, what do you think? Let's get a couple of secretaries down." And we sat there for another 10 hours, and we wrote a handwritten contract. And I signed it. I called Michael. He flew Wadley in, and Wadley was up there with no film, with 18,000 photographers and no film. Wadley flew to the top of the Pan Am building. I gave him a check for 100,000. He went into his places in New York, bought the film, and flew back up and started shooting the Woodstock movie. And that's how the movie happened, exactly.
How many camera guys did you have? I mean, you had a lot of angles.
I think he had about 6 cameras going, yeah.
Wow. And just the mere fact of the film, at the time, it just was major league. I mean, you had a constant...
Well, Michael and I did pick Wadley. I mean, Michael was involved in that part. We saw the Maisley stuff. We saw Barbara Koppel's stuff. I mean, we saw all the documentarians that worked. And Wadley's split-screen concept really fascinated us.
Yeah.
you know, and we just saw some of his work that he was working on, and that was it.
It took a while for it to actually come out. Did it get caught up in just editing?
Oh, well, no, first was the battle, you know, they had to get through the battle. It was, I really can't say anything because there's legalities involved. But, yeah, Michael and I got screwed very bad. You know, if I would have had more money, we would have won the case. Warners wanted me and Michael out because they knew I made the deal, and I would insist. My deal was 50% of the gross, minus negative, of course. They said, Artie, we won't have to advertise because you advertise the festival so much, we won't have to spend a dime on advertising. And it was 50-50, us and Warner Brothers. John and Joel were rich kids. All they wanted was to look good to their father's friends and get back the $1.4 million they were in debt. So we raised $1 million with Albert Grossman, who was a good friend of mine.
Right.
And the night we came to sign, we were going to sell to them for 3 months the movie, and we had 90 days to get the other 400,000 we needed. And then we didn't know. When I went to Warner's, they said that they had to keep out of this and stay neutral. They were negotiating in bad faith with Joel and John's family because one of John Roberts' brothers went to college with one of the board, and they were negotiating the whole time because they knew all they wanted was their $1.4 million back. They knew that Michael and I would stick to the 50%. And that's what happened. Now, Theodore Keel, who broke the New York Times strike, the litigator, he was Michael. After my lawyer, I realized wasn't heavy enough, we went to Ted Keel, and he said, we got him. He says, but it's going to cost another $50,000. I'm doing this pro bono, but it's going to take another $50,000 because I got to get investigators to investigate this. Because I have the proof now that they lied to you, that they cheated you, and it's going to revert back that you own 50% of the music. And I didn't have the 50 grand. And I said to Michael, instead of this hitting the papers and ruining the name of the concert, let's just take the 75 grand or whatever we got and let's just walk. And that's what I did. You know? I walked from that, and I walked right into Eye of the Tiger, Rockin' in the Free World. I mean, all the records I did, you know.
Is it hard to watch the movie today?
Hard to watch the movie?
Yeah, when you had all that background.
Well, I've only watched it 3 times in 45 years, so is it hard to watch it? I think Michael Wadley's director's cut is much better, the 40th director's cut, you know. And no, it's like my baby. It's sort of like watching my child grow up. It's easy to watch it. I've seen it on TV. I have a copy. I've only played it twice.
Right.
You know, and I gave my platinum album. I had 75 platinum albums. I gave them all to charity to be auctioned off. I have nothing on my wall. But I did see my Woodstock when I signed. It sold for $9,500 on eBay about 5 months ago.
Is that right?
Yeah, and I gave it to the T.J. Martell Foundation, which is a music business foundation for, you know, that helps kids that are born to crack mothers and stuff like that. We raise about $200 million a year. It's that big.
Wow.
You know, Huey Lewis is about. I ran the golf tournament. We make about $6 million in a weekend. I was on the board. You know, I give a lot of my income to that charity. Yeah.
The Pied Piper of Woodstock, the moniker. Do you like that?
Well, yeah, because I wrote the Pied Piper, and the Pied Piper almost predicts Woodstock. Follow me, I'm the Pied Piper, and I'll show you where it's at.
Yeah.
You with your masquerading, you always contemplating what to do in case happiness found you. Can't you see it's all around you?
Yeah.
And I was talking to the generation, hey, babe, what are you trying to prove? You know, it ain't true that your life has kicked you, it's your mind, and it's all that's tricking you, so fall in line.
Today, Woodstock, 45 years ago. What's this generation? You're going to speak to folks at Fredonia here today. What's the message they walk away with?
Well, I've been working on the college for years now because I knew that the future, if America was going to be saved, it was going to have to keep the feeling of Woodstock, and I was going to have to get it to college. So my internet show, which is the #1 internet show in the world, I mean 18 million hits and 150,000 to 200,000, everything in the archives has over 300,000 hits. My May Pang interview is 2.4 million hits. You know, and me and Michael talking got 1.4 million listening live. just me and Michael talking. So it's like, I'm seeing what I dreamed about. I'm seeing what I dreamed about, that this generation was, I said it's going to take 3 or 4 to 5 generations, but Woodstock's going to hang around. Now, why did I know? When I went to Italy, with Wadley, it was a documentary festival. They flew us over, it was first class and all that kind of shit. And these kids were so into Woodstock. When I went to Korea, these kids were so into Woodstock, and I spoke at 12 colleges in 15 days in Korea, and all those kids were nuts. One kid, I was speaking in one college in Seoul, and this kid comes running from the back with a Rolex watch, waving it and saying, "I love you, Artie Kornfeld. I want to give you a gift. I want to give you a gift." And he's waving a Rolex watch, and I'm wearing my, it's heavy. I'm wearing my 19-year-old Swiss Army watch that I wear, and now I'm wearing my Target $12 watch, because I'm not really into that kind of stuff. And so he comes running down. It's big things, and he was tall, and it's unusual for Korean, but it was really touching. So I just hugged him and said, "No, I don't need you. I don't need your watch, brother. I just love you."
Yeah.
And he went walking back, and he was all excited that he came up. It was so bizarre. Out of nowhere, this guy's running. I thought he was going to stab me. Yeah. And he's waving his watch. It was hysterical. And there was a translator there, so I had no idea what he was saying anyway.
Right. The juices, do you still get the juices flowing with that kind of reaction?
Well, yeah, that's why I do my radio show every week.
Yeah.
What do you think? It's 72. It's easy to sit there at 10 o'clock at night till 11 and then try to come down in 2 hours, because the shows are always good.
Yeah.
Because I know what to ask.
Yeah.
And I have great acts on.
So finally, I know you probably have to run, but I'm just so thrilled. What's the legacy of Woodstock?
Legacy of Woodstock? The legacy of Woodstock is that in 500 years, when they forgot about the Beatles, if there's still people living, they're still going to remember the greatest peaceful event. The legacy was Time magazine when they listed the top 20 events of mankind, making Woodstock #2. When they said it was the greatest peaceful man-made event in the history of all mankind, and it was second to man landing on the moon.
And the legacy of Artie Kornfeld is what?
That I'm sitting here with you right now. 45 years later.
Yeah. Well, I'm just so thrilled.
I hope what I do next year will be my legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you.
My pleasure.
This is great. Thank you. Thank you.
We went a little more in depth than I thought, but it was a good interview.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
That'll last a couple of minutes. You need your keys and your pen?
Thank you.
No, I know it's on me. I'm used to
Would you
this.
want your keys?
Good job.
Tonight, thank you.
I'm surprised they gave you so much information. Some stuff you know not to.
Yeah, there's still there.
Oh, yeah, this is private
You know
stuff.
what not
I think
to.
you left it on our desk is what you did. You left the poster.
Thank Artie, can I get you to sign this sheet here? It's not a release, it's just sort of a Wikipedia.
Yeah, what are you going to do with this? You got to let me know.
What, this here?
Yeah.
Oh, nothing, this goes to my file, this is my private little thing. These are my notes.
Okay.
Oh, that's from your Wikipedia.
That's your Wikipedia. It's not a release.
It's before they hacked it.
Oh, that's before it was hacked, right?
Right.
Someone came in and took out.
Oh, my.
You know where you go to Artie Kornfeld -Woodstock, hit resume, and then you'll get the real.
No, thank you.
You'll see all the records. Like
Did
this
you
is
do it? You've done it a few times.
Who does that?
Did
I don't know.
they ever figure?
Someone at Woodstock.